Picture this. You're lying in a hotel bed, exhausted after a long day of travel. The room is dark, quiet, and you're just about to drift off to sleep when you hear it. A soft knock at your door. You check the time. It's 3 in the morning. Who could possibly be knocking at this hour? You get up, walk to the door, and look through the peephole. There's no one there, but the knocking continues. Your blood runs cold as you realize the truth. You're not alone in this hotel, and your uninvited guest has been dead for over a century. Welcome to the terrifying world of haunted hotels, where the living and the dead share the same roof. And checkout time doesn't always mean goodbye. These aren't just stories made up to scare tourists. These are real places with real histories and real ghosts that refuse to leave. Tonight, we're going to take you inside some of the most haunted hotels on Earth, where guests check in but some spirits never check out. Hotels are supposed to be places of comfort and rest, but what happens when those temporary homes become permanent residences for the dead? What happens when the walls themselves hold memories so powerful that they echo through time? Tonight, you'll discover that some hotels offer more than just room service. They offer encounters with the supernatural that will haunt you long after you've checked out. Let's start our journey in the mountains of Colorado, at a place that inspired one of the most terrifying horror novels ever written. The Stanley Hotel in Estes Park doesn't just look like something out of a nightmare, it is a nightmare. And it all began with a single devastating explosion. It was 1911, and the Stanley Hotel was the crown jewel of Colorado's Rocky Mountains. But on one fateful night, everything went wrong. There was a gas leak in room 217. The hotel's head housekeeper, Elizabeth Wilson, entered the room carrying a lit candle. The explosion was so powerful it destroyed the entire west wing. Elizabeth was thrown through the air, her body broken and burned. Miraculously, she survived and continued working at the hotel for many more years. But when Elizabeth finally died, something strange happened. She never left. Guests staying in room 217 began reporting bizarre incidents. They would return to their rooms to find their belongings mysteriously unpacked and neatly arranged, as if an invisible housekeeper had been at work. Suitcases that had been zipped shut were found open, with clothes folded and placed in drawers. The hotel's original owners, Flora and F.O. Stanley, also refused to leave. Guests regularly hear haunting piano music drifting through the halls late at night. When they follow the sound, they find it's coming from the music room, where an antique Steinway piano sits in darkness. But there's no one at the keys. The music is being played by Flora Stanley's ghost, who continues to entertain guests from beyond the grave. F.O. Stanley has been spotted in the billiards room, appearing as a translucent figure overseeing games of pool. Guests see a well-dressed man in old-fashioned clothing watching their games, only to vanish when they try to approach him. The Stanley Hotel's reputation became legendary when Stephen King stayed there in 1974. King and his wife were the only guests in the massive hotel during the off-season, and the experience was so unsettling that it inspired him to write The Shining. King said the hotel felt alive with supernatural energy, and he could sense spirits throughout his stay. From Colorado, our journey takes us to New York City, to a place where creativity and death have always walked hand in hand. The Hotel Chelsea has been home to some of the most famous artists, writers, and musicians in history.
It's a world-famous New York City establishment at the Hotel Chelsea.
But it's also been home to tragic deaths, and those who died there have never truly left. The Hotel Chelsea opened in 1884, attracting bohemian artists, writers, and free spirits. The hotel became a cultural landmark where creativity flourished. But with all that passion came darkness, and the Chelsea soon became known for its tragic deaths and supernatural occurrences. One of the most famous ghosts is Welsh poet Dylan Thomas. Thomas was a brilliant but troubled writer who struggled with alcoholism. In November 1953, he stayed at the Chelsea for what would be his final visit. During this stay, Thomas fell into a coma after heavy drinking and died days later at age 39. But death couldn't keep Dylan Thomas away. Guests staying in room 206, where Thomas spent his final nights, have reported seeing his ghost. But this isn't a peaceful spirit. Thomas appears as a disembodied head, floating in the air with anguish on his face. Witnesses see his head materialize, eyes wide with terror, mouth open as if trying to speak words that will never come. The Chelsea's most notorious ghost story involves the violent death of Nancy Spungen, girlfriend of Sex Pistols bassist Sid Vicious. On October 12, 1978, Spungen was found stabbed to death in room 100. Vicious was charged with her murder but died of an overdose before trial. Since his death, guests and staff have reported seeing his ghost throughout the hotel. He appears as a pale, thin figure with wild hair, wandering the halls in a drug-induced haze. Witnesses have seen him riding the elevator, pressing buttons with skeletal fingers, or heard his voice echoing through corridors, calling Nancy's name in anguish. Perhaps the most heartbreaking ghost is Mary, whose husband perished on the Titanic. After receiving news of the disaster, Mary checked into the Chelsea and never left. Guests have seen her in various rooms, always standing before a mirror, grooming herself as if preparing for her husband's return. She appears in early 20th century clothing, her face etched with eternal sadness, brushing her hair slowly, waiting for a reunion that will never come. we travel to London, where one of the city's most prestigious hotels harbors dark secrets. The Langham Hotel has welcomed distinguished guests since 1865, but not all visitors have been among the living. Many consider the Langham the most haunted hotel in London, and the epicenter of supernatural activity is Room 333. Room 333 is not for the faint of heart. This room has been the site of so many supernatural encounters that only the bravest guests dare spend the night there. The room's dark history began in the Victorian era, when a doctor and his new bride checked in for their honeymoon. For unknown reasons, the doctor murdered his wife in the room before taking his own life. The violence of their deaths trapped their spirits in Room 333. Guests who stay in Room 333 report seeing the doctor's ghost, still wearing Victorian clothing, pacing with blood on his hands. His face is twisted with madness and guilt, trapped in an endless loop of his final act. The bride's spirit also appears in a blood-stained wedding dress, her face pale and eyes filled with terror. The Victorian couple isn't alone. A German prince who stayed at the hotel in the early 20th century also haunts the room. Overwhelmed by financial ruin, the prince threw himself from the 4th floor. His ghost appears in full military uniform, but his body bears horrific injuries from his fatal fall. Guests see him standing at the window, looking down at the street where he died. The supernatural activity doesn't stop there. A ghostly butler, forever barefoot, serves invisible guests, carrying silver trays as if attending to people who aren't there. A footman in an elaborate powdered wig has been spotted, bowing formally before vanishing. Most remarkably, Napoleon III's ghost has been seen in imperial robes, surveying the space as if it were his palace. Now let's travel to Savannah, Georgia, known as one of America's most haunted cities. At the heart of its ghostly reputation stands the Marshall House, a hotel with a history so dark that it's impossible to ignore the spirits that call it home. The Marshall House was built in 1851, but during the Civil War it was converted into a hospital for Union soldiers. The beautiful guest rooms became makeshift operating theaters and morgues. Hundreds of soldiers died within these walls, many far from home and family. The true horror wasn't revealed until the 1990s renovation. As workers tore up old floorboards, they made a gruesome discovery. Hidden beneath were human remains, bones and body parts left behind from the hotel's time as a Civil War hospital. The discovery explained the intense supernatural activity guests had reported for decades. Civil War soldiers still roam the Marshall House halls. Guests report seeing ghostly figures in military uniforms walking through corridors, their faces pale and eyes hollow. These apparitions appear solid until someone approaches, then vanish into thin air. The soldiers seem to be searching for something, perhaps trying to find their way home. The most disturbing activity involves children's spirits. During the war, the hotel served as an orphanage for children whose parents had died. Many children succumbed to disease and their young spirits seem trapped forever. Guests regularly hear children crying in the middle of the night, their sobs echoing through halls with heartbreaking intensity. They also hear small feet running through corridors, accompanied by laughter and the sound of a ball bouncing, as if invisible children are playing games. The Marshall House's supernatural activity includes poltergeist phenomena. Doorknobs jiggle on their own, bathroom faucets turn on by themselves, and toilets overflow without being flushed, flooding bathroom floors with water that appears from nowhere. Our final destination takes us to California, to the Hotel Del Coronado in San Diego. In November 1892, a young woman named Kate Morgan checked into the Hotel Del Coronado. She was beautiful, well-dressed, and waiting for someone. Kate told staff she was expecting her husband, but as days passed, it became clear he wasn't coming. Kate had been abandoned, left alone with nowhere to go. The heartbreak consumed her, and on November 29, 1892, Kate Morgan was found dead in her third-floor room. She had taken her own life, unable to bear the pain of abandonment. But Kate's story didn't end with death. Almost immediately, guests and staff began reporting strange occurrences in her room. The temperature would drop suddenly, lights would flicker without explanation, and guests would hear footsteps pacing across the floor. Most disturbing, guests sometimes see a young woman in Victorian dress standing by the window, looking out at the ocean with infinite sadness. Kate Morgan's ghost has become so famous that her room is now the most requested at the Hotel Del Coronado. Guests specifically book the room hoping to encounter her spirit. Some report feeling a presence, a sense they're not alone. Others have seen her reflection in mirrors or caught glimpses of her figure. Kate seems to be a gentle ghost, more sad than frightening, forever waiting for a love that will never return. What makes these hotels truly terrifying isn't just the ghost sightings or the unexplained phenomena. It's the human stories behind them. These aren't just ghosts, they're people whose stories continue long after their lives have ended. The next time you check into a hotel, especially one with a long history, remember that you might not be the only guest in your room. The walls around you have witnessed decades or even centuries of human drama, births and deaths, celebrations and tragedies, love and loss. And sometimes, just sometimes, that history refuses to stay buried. So whether you're a believer in the paranormal or a skeptic looking for a rational explanation, these haunted hotels offer something that's increasingly rare in our modern world. A connection to the past that's immediate, visceral, and impossible to ignore. They remind us that history isn't just something we read about in books. It's something that lives and breathes around us, sometimes literally. The world's most haunted hotels are waiting for you if you're brave enough to check in. But remember, while you can always check out, you might find that some experiences follow you home. And who knows, maybe someday your own story will become part of the haunted history of these incredible places. Sweet dreams.